Can the Pacers counter any late season fatigue while fighting in the seedings race? That is a huge question that Rick Carlisle talked about this week. Plus, Jarace Walker surge, why it's important for the playoffs, and Tyrese Haliburton stats are not being talked about enough. Pat Boylan's going to join us to talk about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, jam-packed fun episode with Pat Boylan, sideline reporter / play-by-play / analyst / radio / everything extraordinaire for the Pacers, diving into some on-the-menu topics about the team, including their late-season push for seeding combined with their mental and physical fatigue from the stroke of a season. Rick Carlisle asked about it this week. Thought his answer was interesting. We got to talk about that. Jarace Walker's emergence ahead of the playoffs, what that could mean. And, of course, Tyrese Haliburton's absurd stats. Really fun conversation. We were fighting the technological gods, both on my end and on his end, and at the grace of the power lords of Indianapolis. I hope everybody stayed safe from the storm. So bear with me on the tech today, but great episode with Pat Boylan. Let's just get right to it. We are now joined by the great Pat Boylan, who does too many things for the Pacers, sideline reporting and radio and fever czar and analyst and play-by-play guy. Pat, did I get it all? How are you doing as the Pacers season is somehow almost over?
Doing well here, Tony. Good to be with you. I appreciate the short intro because some people, when I do this, actually try to list everything, and by no means do I mind that. But then, we're like 26 minutes into the podcast by the time they're done with my title, and it really just wastes time. Doing well here. I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer for anybody listening. I'm going through it a little bit over here. We're on about 18 hours of no power from those storms last night. So if I sound a little bit different or lower quality than you, just the disclaimer that I'm calling into a telephone line. You're kind enough to still allow this to happen. We're going through some 2002 technology here to make this work, but it's good to be with you nonetheless.
Yeah, I currently have my camera recording on a different computer and my audio recording on this computer, so we're just going to run it and see how it goes. I think it sounds great, and if people are mad that storms have made this impossible to do, screw them. There are 6 games left in the Pacers season, Pat, and I find their exact current position extremely fascinating because they are not secured in their seed or in what their first playoff matchup could be, but getting pretty close to feeling pretty good about where they're going to end up. But at the same time, very clear signs of hey, the season is getting to a point where you got to think about your players' bodies. And yes, there's a gap between the end of the regular season and the playoffs. But, the Cavs, the Thunder, even the Celtics at times, all these top teams have at times started to rest guys. And Rick Carlisle asked about it on the morning show yesterday, talked about the fatigue of this part of the season for players, and specifically he was asked about Pascal Siakam by Kevin Bowen and said, it'd be great if I could get Pascal Siakam a day off. I'm just not sure I can do that. I'm curious what you are seeing with the team with regards to that, and to state my own opinion first, I think they've done a good job pushing through it, and how you would try to prioritize kind of that balance of, man, this point of the season and you need to get a seed, but also hey, your guys could probably use some days off if possible.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And first and foremost, it's a question that, frankly, I'm stunned that we're having. I had this conversation with Jeremiah Johnson, who I have a podcast with as well. And up until a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I just had it cemented in my head that the Pacers should clinch well ahead of the final week. But if they want the 4 seed, or if they are contesting for the 4 seed, that it's probably going to go down to the final couple of games. And so it's amazing to me that all of a sudden you looked up. I mean, maybe the first time I realized it was 3 or 4 games ago, where you look up and you say, okay, not only are the Pacers in 4th here, but they're in a spot where if they just take care of business, they don't need to have a great finish. They just need to not have a poor finish, and they'll be there with home court advantage, which is really amazing to think about, especially when you consider last year the Pacers had a similar record to this and went into the final day of the season needing to win to avoid the play-in tournament. So
Right.
It's interesting because I think we had this conversation on your podcast the last time I was on a couple of months ago, and how it kind of felt like the team was on a similar win-loss trajectory, but at the same time, the environment around them is really, really different. And so that's fascinating to me in of itself, and I think the question that you asked is a really good one. I think Pascal Siakam is so consistent, and he has been – I thought he was good in Wednesday's game, but for his high level of consistency, maybe hasn't been quite there lately. So perhaps do you point to him being able to use a day or two off? Yeah, maybe. And I think maybe that picture starts to become a little bit more clear as you head into the final week. I think it's something that if you can do it, it would be really nice to do. And hopefully the Pacers, will continue to take care of business so they can have that option if they want to do it, if he wants to do it. I want to make it clear that every time I'm speaking on your podcast or wherever, I'm not speaking. I work for the team, but I'm not speaking for the team. I don't know what Rick Carlisle and the team is thinking. That one-off in Denver is maybe a little too early to think about doing something like that, but who knows? If you took care of business on Friday and maybe got some luck with what's going on in Detroit or Milwaukee, you may feel good enough about a game like that, which is a really oddly scheduled game. You don't typically see games out west in one-off situations this late in the year. Yeah, so maybe there's something there. But I do think the way the schedule works out now is still advantageous from the prospect of, even if the Pacers aren't able to get him a game off, if they do indeed want to do that, you're still going to have at minimum 5 days between your regular season finale and playoff game number one. And I think that could be enough, especially for a veteran like Siakam who knows his body, who's been there, done that. We saw how ready he was for game one last year. So my level of concern on that is probably like a 3 or a 4. It's worth monitoring, I do think, but I'm not overly concerned. And I think the answer to that question might simply just be you're going to have a few days off, and that might be enough.
I agree with basically everything you just said, but the fact that the rest of the teams are doing it, and I think the fact that Rick Carlisle said he would like to do it if the schedule made it possible, does show that they know there is value in potentially doing so. And the Denver game is fascinating because if they had one more win right now, I honestly think they would maybe do it. Like, think really hard about it for that game, because I was talking to somebody last night about this. I can't remember them going farther west than Houston for a one-off game like this. All the way to Denver and back is so weird. It's an altitude game. It's a really good opponent. Like, if you felt really good about the seed you were going to get, that's like as close to scheduled punt mode as you could get to me. But you kind of can't, because right now, with 6 to go, they need 3 wins and they're locked into 4-5. Because they are fortunate, Detroit and Milwaukee play each other 2 more times this season. So that odd scheduling quirk does give them a big edge to keep their thing. And I think Detroit, New York is either Friday or Saturday, right? So there's going to be a lot of clarity in their situation pretty soon. Next Friday, to be clear. But it's just not quite solid enough ground to me that they can risk anything. I do think they need to be putting their best foot forward. Now, I think the maybe realistic or optimistic person would say, well, they do play Utah and Washington at home still, which means they only need one more win to guarantee themselves into the 4-5 if they win those games. That is also true, right? Or you could even consider, hey, is that a game you rest them against because you feel good about your chances of winning? But I think if I were in charge, I would be just putting my best foot forward with who is available basically every game until I knew for sure that I was in a certain bracket of the playoffs, or I knew for sure I had home court advantage, which both could be clinched as soon as this weekend or next Tuesday if everything breaks their way. That's super unlikely. But it's just so valuable to have home court advantage that I personally, if I were running the Pacers, be willing to risk that small trade-off of fatigue or burnout late in the season, just because of you were around. They didn't lose till the conference finals last year. Like, home court really matters. They didn't lose at home until the conference finals last year. Like, that really matters, and I get that this is all 2 kind of competing goals running at the same time, but I think goal number 1's got to be to get 4 and secure yourselves into the right side of that bracket.
Yeah, I completely agree. The 4 is so important here. The conversation is just so different from last year where, maybe 5 or 6 isn't a huge difference. 4 versus 5 is a huge difference. And so I do think you probably have to go pedal to the metal. Again, maybe there is a scenario where you win Friday and get some Milwaukee, Detroit losses in there. You feel more comfortable with it. One thing Rick Carlisle is really good and cognizant of, in my opinion, compared to other coaches, is being aware of that type of stuff. And whereas some coaches can't help themselves from playing guys 36, 37, 38 minutes, like I think every coach theoretically understands it. But when push comes to shove, it's not easy. And we're not talking about the exact same thing here, but we're talking about something similar. It's not the easiest thing in the world when you have a tight game to hold Haliburton to 30 to 32 minutes. And there are other coaches out there, some very good, by the way, who are completely incapable of doing that. And I think on the other hand, Rick Carlisle is very good at seeing the bigger picture in that regard, at saying if we drop one here, but it allows us to be more confident in where Haliburton is physically, then that's a win for us. And so it's something I'm confident he's thinking about and maybe mapping out. And it's too bad that Milwaukee and Detroit aren't playing,
now
Thursday and Saturday or something, because you're going to get a couple losses in there. You just don't know where they're going to be.
Right.
So it almost artificially inflates the magic number because you have to assume worst case scenario there. But in reality, you're very likely going to get a loss or two that helps you even more in that magic number, which is, as we're talking here on Thursday, it's 4. And that's because of Milwaukee. But it's convoluted because Detroit's actually ahead of Milwaukee, but the magic number with Detroit is lower. So it's confusing. It's too bad those guys don't play each other earlier, because then you might be able to formulate something like we're talking about, and maybe it'll still happen. It wouldn't shock me if it still happened. But I do agree in general. I think the thought process is correct. 4 is so important that you don't mess with it until you got it.
I think if we're up to the Pacers, they would like to see Detroit-Milwaukee on Friday at 3:30, and then Detroit-Milwaukee again Friday at 8:30. Just get it done on the same day, knock it out, know their situation for the rest of the season. Everyone, quick little break to talk about 2 great groups of people. First up, 5-Hour Energy Daylight Savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep from basketball, the tournament, late Pacers games, whatever, 5-Hour Energy has your back. Extra sunshine now means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the tournament, squeezing in around a golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. With basketball going on constantly right now, everybody's staying up late watching tournament action. 5-Hour Energy helps you throughout the day. And with longer days, you can get outside for things like a hike or a run. Tropical Burst could be your go-to flavor for a quick boost. And whether you're at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps you feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? You can grab a 5-Hour Energy at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up now and stay energized. We also have got to talk about Wayfair. Spring is here. It's home project season. I've already done 2 this year, and whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. From small updates like stylish cabinet hardware to major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, Wayfair has quality products for every budget. I just upgraded the bathroom in my master bedroom using Wayfair products. The selection, incredible. They're free and fast shipping. Makes it so easy. No hauling heavy items from the store. Love that they have top brands like GE and Moen at great prices. Shopping is seamless. You can find exactly what you need. It'll fit your space and style. Wayfair makes home improvement easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. I want to pivot to a very rare, like late March, early April, like colossal shift in a rotation for a playoff team that might have home court advantage, and one that a lot of fans have been talking about before it even happened. Jarace Walker's playing now. Ben Mathurin missed time. That's like impacted what we'll see the total rotation looking like. But not only is Jarace Walker playing, he's playing quite well, right? He came in that Lakers game in the second half. It was his first major rotation minutes in a meaningful game in a while. And he's played multiple good games in a row with big minutes since, making shots, making plays on defense, the physicality that they've been asking for this season last for forever. One, how big of a deal do you feel like it is if he can emerge in time to be potentially playoff viable? And two, what have you seen that's allowed him to look so much better than he did, throughout other parts of 2025?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is probably just explained by a young player who is still on the raw side of things, and you're going to go through some ups and you're going to go through some downs. And it's a little bit of a catch-22 because how do you get him to be less raw without playing time? But at the same time, if you give him playing time when he is raw for a team that's trying to compete, that can be challenging too. And the Pacers, while I think their second unit playing better is a big, important goal here, and they started to do it last couple of games, but a big, important goal before they get to the playoffs. Still, you look at the rotation, and there are guys that are going to be part of that second unit, and when the playoff rotation starts to trim down some, it's a fascinating conversation where Jarace Walker fits into things, because I think you look at maybe him and Ben Shepherd, and they're different guys, of course. They play different positions, they're different skill sets and all of that. But you maybe look at what Walker's done the last couple of weeks and say he's got a higher ceiling to be a game changer, maybe a little bit. If you just watch him defensively when he's on, he's like, his hands are really impressive to me. Like he's got such good ability and awareness on the defensive end, and he's just got long arms as is, where he deflects a lot of passes, a lot of dribbles, a lot of drives, and just kind of stunts what the other team is doing. And when the shot is falling, I would say, him versus Shepherd, he's probably got the higher ceiling, but I'm very confident that Ben Shepherd is somebody that Rick Carlisle trusts immensely. Trust as much as you can trust a second-year player who's not one of your stars. I mean, you know what you're going to get for him, but he has been mired in a pretty significant shooting slump. And, sometimes these questions, you look at them and you almost view them too rigidly. It could be that both of them play a few minutes. It could be that you bounce around between the two and see what works and mix and match. It could be that if you're fortunate enough to win a playoff series, one guy makes more sense than the other against specific opponents. There can be a lot of reasons to it, but I think it's been a really welcome sight here for the Pacers and their second unit, which hasn't been playing quite up to the level I think they're capable of, because he's injected a lot of energy into things. And obviously when you have a guy that was picked in the top 10 like he was, you want to see him looking like that, showing shades of what he's capable of. And what has led to this, I just tend to think he's getting an opportunity and showing some confidence, and games are kind of stacking on each other. And to me, the question becomes, is he ready at his age and in his development to go from a really nice couple of weeks to being somebody that you can consistently count on in the playoffs? I hope he's ready to do that. If he is, the Pacers are going to benefit significantly from it, I think, especially defensively, because that second unit, a lot of really good players, but, Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell, for example, you don't necessarily think of them as defense first guys, although Toppin did a great job on Sabonis the other night. So I think the Walker storyline is maybe the most interesting individual player to watch down the stretch here. How does Rick Carlisle handle his minutes? Where is he in the rotation? And when the playoffs come around, does he have a role? What does it look like? And is he ready for the moment? It's just so many fascinating questions. And obviously, from a Pacers perspective, you hope that answer is yes, because I do think he brings a certain dynamic that nobody else on that second unit currently has.
Yeah, my take for forever was that they're doing the right thing playing Shepherd, because I thought Shepherd's defense was better and he made enough threes that the offensive gap wasn't worth switching with. Like you said, when there's a young guy growing, you just never know what you're going to get. And Rick Carlisle referenced the chicken and the egg thing, right? Is it like, is this young player not producing because he's not getting opportunity, or is he not getting opportunity because he's not producing? And then it's just like a never-ending discussion that leads you nowhere. Well, with Shepherd missing as much as he did, it did make sense to shift that discussion to, well, let's try Jarace now. Like, the offensive gap isn't wide at all anymore. If anything, it's so wide in favor of Jarace that you'd switch it. And he's played very well. And that the reason I bring up Shepherd and that gap is because Walker's offense has been really good. Like, he's making threes every game. I think he's made good decisions while handling towards the rim and the chances that he's getting. Power is there, and I think that is something that, you've heard this all the time, the coaching staff has asked him to do. Play with force, play physically, be a use on the glass, and he's done all of that stuff. And that's where I think I've seen him make the most progress going forward. And one, it's good for the Pacers that, like, full stop, their young player is playing better. Like, regardless of the playoff part of the conversation, that's a good thing, right? They can be more confident next year in his abilities. They can even, for the rest of this season, continue to play him and feel fine about that. For the second unit, no problem. However, from a playoff perspective, I don't know what this will mean. I just did a conversation with Alex Golden about who we thought would and wouldn't play come playoff time, and, like, it's hard to go past 8 or 9 for most teams. There's just this temptation that every coach will have is, Rick Carlisle talks about this all the time. Skilled size is like the way the NBA is trending, and Jarace Walker has skill and size. So if he keeps proving it, I think he might get a chance just because that kind of archetype can be valuable. But you're right to say it's a different stage, it's a different setting, it's a different style. If it doesn't translate immediately, the leash should not be long, right? It's got to be all about the wins, obviously, in a playoff setting. So it will be and should be tempting to think about what this could look like there. And it's the same conversation. Well, you get a playoff experience now, it'll be better for the future. Yeah, but, like, you got to win. It's about winning games. So I think it's good for them. I think it's good for the philosophy of the team that a large-bodied human who can make a lot of three-point shots right now is continuing to make three-point shots and play physically. It's also going to lead to more conversations in a few weeks come playoff time. And it's a good problem to have for the Pacers that they're young second-year players are all jostling for position late in the year.
And it's funny that we're talking about a couple of second-year guys here, but as I think most people understand, it just adds to the intrigue. You're talking about Ben Shepherd, a second-year guy who did 4 years of college, and you're talking about Jarace Walker, who's the more modern, high draft pick based on potential. He's super young. They're trying to see, what that potential can become. So it's kind of funny because you look at guys like Nembhard and Shepherd, and those guys still being young guys as it relates to the NBA, but they're a lot more mature when they came out. So a second-year guy maybe feels like a fourth-year guy, even if they had the same amount of experience. But, he offers, I think, the higher ceiling option, and when you're a Pacers team that is very clearly quite good, but maybe not one that is going to be picked to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals or make another really deep run, those higher ceiling guys are always intriguing. Are they the type of players who, perhaps could, I don't love the term X factor, but for lack of a better term here, be an X factor. Lift your ceiling when you're not expecting it. And typically when you have a series where there's an upset, which the Pacers for the first time since I've been covering this team will be going into a playoff series potentially where they are the favorites.
Yeah.
But when you're looking to pull an upset big picture, almost always you see one game in that series where an unheralded guy steps up. And could that be Walker for the Pacers? I don't know. He might not even be getting major playoff minutes. Maybe Rick Carlisle feels like he's not ready, but that's why he's intriguing to me because I think he at least has the potential to lift the ceiling of this group a little bit, especially with the second unit.
I agree. It's very rare that this late in the season a contender has a massive rotational shift like that, but alas, that is life for the Pacers. One more break here, guys. We got to talk about OpenPhone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls all day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That is where OpenPhone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or your computer, and it integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months. When you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA, that's 20% off 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA, 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no additional charge. Pat, you're a numbers guy. Last thing, this Tyrese Haliburton run with these crazy turnover, low numbers, and high assist numbers is just insane. I have told so many people about your tweet. I think it was after the Philly game where he had 11 assists and 1 turnover, and his assist to turnover went down after the All-Star break. And now that stat is like ruined because he had the 3 turnovers in 1 quarter in that game of like last week. But I mean, aren't these numbers just like insane now? We're so used to it. Like the game's over and I'm like, oh yeah, Tyrese Haliburton, that was a pretty normal game for him. And I'm like, wait, that's only been done how many times in league history? Like, it's kind of mind blowing.
I made the point that you're making right there on our podcast a couple of days ago, which is we cannot allow ourselves to think this is normal, because just because we're seeing it night in and night out for almost 2 months now does not make it normal. It's so special. And I know in the casual fan realm, a guy putting up 50 points is always going to catch the spotlight in the headlines more than a guy going through an insane assist to turnover stretch. But when you're doing what Haliburton has done over the course of as many games as he's done, I would certainly argue that it's even more important. I think it maybe reached its apex at 173 to 15, and then that was right before those turnovers started to happen. And that game is such a good example of how ridiculous what he's doing is, because it was, one of the turnovers was a lob to Toppin, which maybe could have gone either way. And one of them, was just kind of, I think, like a random travel that he had. And what I'm getting at is, like, it was just a couple of innocuous moments that any NBA player, even the superstars, make all the time.
Yeah.
Go against them all the time. But it was like, wait, this hasn't happened for this guy in a month and a half. And yeah, I mean, it's statistically incredible. The other thing is, it's hard to put that into perspective without being too cherry picking. But one way to try and do it was, once he got to 15 games played, I looked it up and just kind of put in the parameters of players who've had 150 more assists over 15 games and 15 or fewer turnovers. And the name that I wouldn't have totally guessed would come up, but he's coming up in a lot of these type of searches, is Muggsy Bogues. And Muggsy Bogues is the only other guy that's done that. But an important disclaimer there, which is Bogues has actually done it twice. 15-game stretches with 150-plus assists and 15 or fewer turnovers, so that's obviously 10-1. He did it twice, but in both situations, he had 8 points per game. And Tyrese, during the stretch that he had over 15 games, had 24 points per game. So look, what Bogues was doing was impressive, but Tyrese is tripling his scoring output. Tyrese scored more points in his 1 15-game stretch than Muggsy Bogues did in his 2. And so, yeah, I mean, it's obvious how important he is to this offense. It's obvious how important his playing and him playing well is to what this team is capable of accomplishing this year. But just because he's not the guy that puts up 50 points per game from time to time does not mean that he should not be looked at in the same realm of those guys who do. He just does it differently. And, yeah, I mean, the assist-to-turnover numbers have just been not only incredible statistical anomalies and statistical feats, but huge reasons why the Pacers from the All-Star break on have been as good as they have been. And you consider he missed a few games in there, which explains some of the losses too. He's playing a lot like he did at the beginning of the 2023-24 season, and I think that's hopefully a really good omen as the Pacers head into the playoffs here.
Yeah, I'm glad you went through the multi-game stretch of it to show how rare it is, because what I was doing last night is how often does anyone do this even once a season, to do the 20-10 no turnover thing? Even that is really great players have done it once or twice. That's it in a season. Doing it 4 more times is almost nobody. And a lot of the guys fit that criteria that you just described. Even just look at the passing. The guys who have had 4 games in a season with 10-plus assists and 0 turnovers, there's only been 7 guys who've done that since 2022-23, and Haliburton has done it 3 times in that stretch. The other guys are Chris Paul, Tyus Jones, and Dennis Schroeder. And those guys are good players, but that's the differentiator that I didn't say when I talked about it or tweeted about it, is he scores, and they don't, right? Those guys are known for that thing. They are going to be very error-free setup men, and that's great. like Monte Morris and Tyus Jones, I think of as like this off the bench steady hand. And Chris Paul's obviously a star player, or at least was. He's exceptional, but like none of them are sniffing, great shooting nights or 20, 30 points in a game. And Haliburton has been doing even that very consistently over this whole stretch. It's like this is so insane at his volume to do without the turnovers. The other part of it that's not a stat that cracks me up, and I do feel bad laughing, but like you can see this, the agony he has during his turnovers now is very funny to me. Like it's so painful that even if it's just like him and Andrew Nembhard, they make the same read and the pass is just slightly off and it caroms out of bounds. He's like, his fists are clenched and he's standing there and play, his lob at top and goes a little too high and comes down weird off the backboard. Like that's fine. That's a fine error to make. It's not costing your team points. Like it is crushing to him to have these turnovers. And I think that kind of mentality is what has made this all possible.
Yeah, and what's funny is you're saying all that, it's got me thinking down a couple of avenues, but one of them just being typically guys that have these great assist-to-turnover ratios are not always the best assisters. They are the guys who are the best at taking care of the ball and also can pass. Don't get me wrong. Like Tyus Jones, he's a good passer, but it's the guys who keep the turnover numbers so low that eventually the assists just add up. It's incredible that he has as few turnovers as he does when he's making the type of passes that he does. The launches half court to Obi Toppin. I mean, how often does Haliburton drive and then get kind of hung up midair and then flip a skip pass across the floor? Or he had an amazing one in the third or fourth quarter last night where I was like, how did he even know Neesmith was over there in the corner? And he hit Neesmith for a three. And that's what's so rare. You have guys who are really good at not turning it over. Maybe Tyus Jones is a good example of that. You have guys like Trae Young who are very good passers and rack up high assist numbers, but also turn it over a lot.
Yeah.
You don't see the two things combined. If you're a good enough passer to make some of those high risk passes, typically you just deal with the fact that you're going to have some turnovers. And yeah, now that he's had this run going, it's funny because he does these things that, like, it happens to every single player in the history of the world, but it looks like, his world is ending for just a moment when he has a turnover. So, no, it's been something that it's important to relish, I think, as a Pacers fan and not get used to, because this is not normal. And it's been cool to get to watch firsthand. And by the way, not to sidetrack, but I actually found an interesting assist stat yesterday. And
I love it. Go.
If you know it or if you would have guessed this caught me off guard, but maybe it wouldn't have caught you off guard. It was T.J. McConnell's 700th game, and so I was looking up just some stuff as it relates to that. This is cool. Not what I'm talking about. This is cool. He's just the 25th player undrafted in league history to reach 700 games. So that speaks for itself. Happens to one player every, 3 years in NBA history, and he's one of them. TJ McConnell is fourth all time among undrafted players in assists. Not per game, just total assists. Which not that I can start naming off a ton of Hall of Fame guys that weren't drafted that have a lot of assists, but that actually was a lot higher than I was expecting and pretty cool. And
who was ahead of him? Manu, and who are the other two?
Oh gosh, you know what? I had it written down, and I could look it up if I had time.
Don't worry about it.
My internet's
I'm
out,
curious.
I can't look it up, but they're the list. I have it on my computer. I can get it.
This is not important. I was just curious.
Doing the search, yeah. But fourth, TJ.
That's crazy.
Fourth all time in total assists among undrafted guys.
Yeah, and his appeal to the Pacers to me has always been, besides that TJ McConnell's like good at basketball, that he can play the same style as they play with their starters, even though he's not Tyrese Haliburton, right? He's not the same shooter or anything like that, but they don't have to slow down. They don't have to switch things up. Like the Nuggets have that huge problem. Their identity completely shifts when they lose Jokic. The Pacers do not have to deal with that as much. Pat Boylan, this was without a doubt the craziest technical difficulty juggling that I've ever had to do with someone who is good at technology before. You are a trooper. Thank you so much. Where can people find you and the many things you do with the Indiana Pacers and Fever?
To be clear one more time, you are adjusting to my massive technical
No.
today. So
I said we're going to record a certain way, and we didn't record that way. That is on me.
I'm in a house with no lighting, with no heat, no nothing. And so this has actually been, I've been like walking around like, what do I even do today? Because I can't get on my computer and start to do work yet. And I keep thinking the power's coming on any minute. And that's clearly not happening. But I digress. At Pat Boylan Pacers on Twitter. As you noted quickly as you were going through the runs at the beginning, we got the Fever season coming up too. So that's really exciting. And we've got a lot of Fever content coming your way. I always just say follow like the Pacers and Fever on digital, on social first and foremost, because they do a great job. But also, some of the stuff I'm able to do, you can find there, especially on the Fever side. We've had some cool one-on-ones lately, and hopefully a few more coming your direction. But that was good to be on with you here, and hopefully the next time we're talking, it's back in our normal technological wheelhouse here, and I'm not sounding like I'm coming to you on what probably sounds like a 1967 rotary dial. But we made it work, and I appreciate your patience.
I don't know what a rotary dial typically sounds like, thankfully, because of my age, but I will take your word for it that this is similar enough. Always a good day when I see Pat Boylan in a suit or blazer, because that means exclusive content is coming via the Fever or Pacers. Pat, thank you for the time. Everybody, thank you for listening. Be back tomorrow after Pacers Jazz. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.